They laughed when Brandon Clark walked in, dismissed him as the guy who listens to pipes. Chief Engineer James Watkins scoffed. After all, Clark was the one he buried 5 years ago. But now the USS Steadfast is dead in the water, and the high-tech systems are useless. Stick around because what Watkins thought was a washed-up nobody turns out to be the only one who can save them. What he didn't know, Clark hears what machines don't. And this time the whole Navy will hear the truth. Don't forget to drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time you found this video. Also hit that subscribe button. Chief Engineer James Watkins straightens his perfectly pressed uniform, the polished brass insignia catching the harsh fluorescent light of the USS Steadfast's engine room. His fingers trace the insignia's edge. 25 years of naval engineering excellence embodied in this small piece of metal. The emergency generator's drone sounds wrong to his trained ear, a constant reminder of his current predicament. True. Status report. His voice booms across the cavernous space, making junior engineers flinch. The ship's heart, her main engine, lies silent, a dead weight of steel and circuits that refuses to yield its secrets. Every diagnostic tool shows nothing, yet they're dead in the water, and the clock is ticking. Lieutenant Chen approaches, tablet in hand, hesitation visible in every step. Sir, we've tried everything in the manual. The Admiral he's requesting we bring in Brandon Clark for consultation. The name hits Watkins like a physical blow. Brandon Clark. The memory surfaces unbidden. 5 years ago, that upstart ensign questioning his methods, suggesting improvements to his perfectly calibrated systems. Watkins had made sure Clark's career in the Navy ended shortly after. Now his perfect record, his reputation, everything he's built hinges on accepting help from the very man he destroyed. Absolutely not. Watkins snaps his reflection in the polished engine housing, showing a face flushed with anger. I won't have that troublemaker anywhere near my engines. But even as the words leave his mouth, his personal tablet chimes with a priority message from Admiral Morrison. Watkins's stomach drops as he reads, Chief Engineer Watkins, this is a direct order. Brandon Clark arrives in 2 hours. Your cooperation is non-negotiable. The USS Steadfast must be operational in 24 hours. The engine room suddenly feels suffocating. Watkins loosens his collar, the brass insignia now burning against his throat. His eyes dart to the security camera in the corner, imagining the footage of this moment being archived, his weakness documented for posterity. Sir! Lieutenant Chen's voice breaks through his spiral. The crew is asking about our next steps. Watkins grips the railing knuckles white. 25 years of authority of being the unquestioned master of his domain, and now this. He catches fragments of whispered conversations among his team, sees the doubt in their eyes. His empire of absolute technical authority is showing its first cracks. A sudden bang from the failing generator makes everyone jump. In that moment of shared fear, Watkins sees his reflection again. Not the confident chief engineer, but a man trapped by his own biases, facing a choice between his pride and his duty. Type pride in the comments if you've ever had to swallow your ego to solve a crisis. Will Chief Engineer James Watkins' technical expertise and authority survive this ultimate test? Can a man who's built his career on never being wrong face the possibility that his greatest mistake wasn't technical, but human? The brass insignia feels heavier than ever as Watkins issues the order he never thought he'd give: prepare the engine room for external consultation. In his mind, a countdown begins 24 hours to save his ship, his reputation, and perhaps something more important, his integrity. The emergency generators continue their ominous hum, a mechanical chorus accompanying the approaching storm. For the first time in 25 years, Chief Engineer James Watkins feels something he hasn't experienced since his first day at the Academy fear. Subscribe now to see how this crisis unfolds and drop one in the comments if you're ready for the next chapter. Chief Engineer James Watkins stared at the maintenance logs spread across his desk, each entry a stark reminder of his carefully constructed system of control. His fingers traced over Brandon Clark's old reports, warnings about engine vibrations that the computers hadn't caught, observations that had seemed so easy to dismiss 5 years ago. The brass insignia on his collar felt heavier than usual as memories surfaced of that dismissal hearing. These traditional methods are outdated, Chief Engineer James Watkins remembered declaring to the review board, his voice dripping with academic superiority. We can't rely on someone pressing their ear to pipes like some kind of witch doctor when we have millions in diagnostic equipment. The maintenance bay's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Chief Engineer James Watkins pulled up the current engine readings on his tablet. Everything looked perfect on the digital displays, yet the Steadfast's massive engines were failing. His modern equipment, his precious data, all useless against the deepening vibration that threatened to tear the ship apart. A young technician approached his office tablet in hand. "Sir, I found something in the archives. Before Mr. Clark's dismissal, there were 17 similar incident reports, all dismissed, all involving issues he identified by sound that our systems missed." Chief Engineer James Watkins felt his chest tighten. "Leave it!" he snapped, but his hands trembled as he reached for his coffee. The liquid rippled, matching the subtle vibration running through the ship's hull, a vibration that reminded him of Clark's words. "Machines can lie, sir, but the metal itself always tells the truth." He pulled up research papers on his computer studies about institutional bias in engineering circles. Words jumped out at him. Traditional knowledge systems, Western technological supremacy, inherited prejudices in STEM fields. Chief Engineer James Watkins had dismissed these as social justice nonsense. Now each phrase felt like an indictment. The brass insignia caught his eye in the office window's reflection. He remembered polishing it the day of Clark's hearing, preparing to represent the modern face of naval engineering. Now its shine seemed to mock him as the vibration grew stronger, carrying echoes of every dismissive word he'd ever spoken. Have you ever watched your certainty crumble? The thought invaded his mind as he gripped the insignia. Have you felt your foundations shake? His phone buzzed, another message from command demanding answers. The Steadfast's mission was critical, and her engines were failing despite every diagnostic showing green. His reputation built on embracing modern technology while dismissing outdated methods was about to collapse. Chief Engineer James Watkins found himself at Clark's old workstation running his hands along the pipes Clark used to monitor. The metal sang with vibrations his machines couldn't detect, speaking a language he'd refused to learn. His mentor's words rang in his ears. "Technology is the future, James. Don't let old-school thinking hold us back." The brass insignia felt cold against his chest as he realized how that mentality had infected everything. His decisions, his judgments, his prejudices. The evidence was overwhelming. Clark had been right, and Chief Engineer James Watkins had led the charge to silence him. Share this moment if you've ever discovered your expertise was really just prejudice in disguise. The ship's vibration grew stronger as the morning wore on. Each tremor felt like judgment, each shudder like karma. Chief Engineer James Watkins had built his career on dismissing people like Clark, convinced that his way, the modern way, was the only way. Now, with millions in equipment flashing useless green lights while his ship died around him, he faced the hidden cost of that arrogance. The young technician returned, hesitating at the door. "Sir, the historical analysis shows a pattern. Every time we ignored Mr. Clark's recommendations, well, he was never wrong. Not once." Chief Engineer James Watkins dismissed the technician with a wave, but the words stuck like daggers. He'd built his authority on delegitimizing Clark's expertise, using the power of his position to enforce his bias. Now, as his ship threatened to tear itself apart, He realized he'd done more than dismiss one man. He'd perpetuated a system that valued certain kinds of knowledge while denigrating others. The brass insignia weighed on him like guilt as he prepared to make the call he'd never imagined making. Brandon Clark's number was still in the system, preserved in the records of his dismissal. Chief Engineer James Watkins's hands shook as he reached for the phone, knowing that with this call he would begin dismantling everything he'd spent his career building. But first he had to face the truth about why he'd really pushed Clark out. It hadn't been about technology versus tradition. It had been about power, about whose knowledge counted, about maintaining a system that kept people like him at the top. The vibration reached a fever pitch as Chief Engineer James Watkins finally admitted to himself the hidden problem wasn't in the engine at all. It was in him. Through the dim light of the engine room, Chief Engineer James Watkins stares at his trembling hands, the same hands that had signed Brandon Clark's dismissal papers months ago. The mechanical chorus that once brought him comfort now sounds like an accusatory symphony, each whir and click a reminder of his monumental error in judgment. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the control panels, where Clark's expertise is now undeniable. Watkins clutches his chief engineer's insignia, the golden pin that had always made him feel invincible. Now it burns against his palm like a brand of shame. His empire of technical superiority, built on decades of prejudice, masked as professional standards, crumbles with each masterful adjustment Clark makes to the failing engine. The auxiliary systems are responding exactly as he predicted. Lieutenant Chen whispers her voice, carrying a note of awe that cuts through Watkins like a knife. He watches as Clark's methodology proves superior to every protocol he'd stubbornly defended over the years. The brass diagnostic rod in Clark's hands dances across the engine housing with an intuition that makes Watkins' digital tools seem primitive. A sudden surge rocks the ship, and Watkins' stomach lurches as he realizes the depth of his miscalculation, not just with the engine, with everything. Sir, Chen continues, her voice harder now. Engineering Command is requesting an immediate video conference about the incident report. Watkins feels the weight of his data pad heavy with years of performance reviews that he now recognizes as nothing more than carefully worded prejudice. How many careers had he stunted? How many brilliant minds had he dismissed because they didn't match his narrow vision of what an engineer should look like? The ship's computer chimes with incoming messages, other department heads requesting explanations, demanding to know why Clark hadn't been consulted sooner. Each notification sounds like another nail in the coffin of Watkins' reputation. He watches as crew members who once hung on his every word now turn to Clark for guidance, their respect shifting like the tide. A memory surfaces Clark's last day, the young engineer's quiet dignity as he packed his tools, including that brass rod Watkins had mocked as outdated. Now that same rod is saving the ship while Watkins' state-of-the-art diagnostics flash useless warnings. The engine's deep thrum changes pitch, harmonizing as Clark works his magic. Watkins' chest tightens as he realizes this sound will forever remind him of his failure, not just as an engineer, but as a leader, as a human being. His fingers trace the edges of his insignia, remembering how proud he'd been when he first pinned it on. Now each point feels like an indictment. Chief, Clark calls out, not looking up from his work, I need you to acknowledge these adjustments in the log. His voice is professional, devoid of the bitterness he'd have every right to express. This simple request forces Watkins to document his own shortcomings, to officially record that Clark's outdated methods were superior. The ship's internal cameras whir as they track the scene. Watkins knows this moment will be reviewed by command, analyzed in training sessions, perhaps even used as a case study in bias awareness programs. His prejudice will become a teaching tool, his fall from grace a warning to others. As the engine stabilizes under Clark's expertise, Watkins catches his reflection in a darkened monitor. A man whose certainty has been stripped away, leaving only the harsh truth of his biases exposed. The emergency lights still pulse, but now they feel less like a warning about the engine and more like a spotlight on his shame. Type humbled if you've ever had to face your own prejudices. Scrolls across his mind like the ship's emergency, broadcasts a bitter reminder that his personal failure could serve a greater purpose. The brass rod taps against the engine housing one final time, a sound that will haunt Watkins' dreams. It's the sound of excellence he chose not to see, of potential he willfully ignored. As Clark straightens up success, evident in the engine's renewed, smooth operation, Watkins feels the full weight of the consequences, not just to the ship, not just to his career, but to every life his bias has touched. The question echoes in his mind, how many others? How many brilliant minds did I silence because they didn't fit my picture of success? James Watkins stands in the engine room of the USS Steadfast, his brass insignia catching the fluorescent light as his fingers trace the now flawless engine housing. The steady hum resonates differently now, not just a mechanical drone, but a complex harmony he'd been too proud to hear before. His mind drifts to Brandon Clark's words from their first encounter. Engineering isn't just about what you see in the manuals. The weight of his earlier arrogance crashes over him like a wave. Watkins remembers dismissing Clark's traditional diagnostic methods, the way he'd sneered at techniques passed down through generations of black naval engineers. "I was so certain," he whispers to the purring engine, "so damn certain I knew everything worth knowing." A young ensign approaches with a tablet displaying the new engineering evaluation protocols that Watkins has spent the last 24 hours drafting. His hands shake slightly as he reviews them one final time. The policies now explicitly protect and promote diverse diagnostic approaches with a special emphasis on preserving traditional knowledge passed through generations of service. "Sir." The ensign says, "Mr. Clark is here for the training session." Watkins turns to see Brandon Clark standing in the doorway, composed and professional, despite everything. The engine's harmonious purr seems to grow stronger, as if acknowledging its savior's presence. Watkins removes his brass insignia, holding it in his palm, like a confession. "Before we begin," Watkins says, his voice carrying over the engine's song, "I need to say something to everyone here." The engineering crew gathers their faces expectant. "My pride nearly cost us this ship. Worse, it cost us the chance to learn from one of the finest engineers I've ever met. I didn't just fail to hear the engine's warning signs, I failed to hear wisdom speaking right in front of me." He faces Clark directly. "Your knowledge isn't just valid, it's vital. And I'm grateful for the chance to learn, truly learn from you now." The brass insignia catches the light one final time as Watkins pins it back on, no longer a symbol of authority, but a daily reminder of humility. As Clark begins explaining the subtle variations in engine harmonics to the assembled crew, Watkins closes his eyes and really listens to the engine, to Clark, to the future taking shape in this moment. I type wisdom if you've ever had to unlearn pride to grow. The day ends with Watkins in his office, updating his personal logs. "The engine speaks a language older than our manuals," he writes. "And thanks to Brandon Clark, we're finally learning to listen. Some might call it a simple mechanical fix, but they'd be missing the real restoration that happened here. The repair of something broken in me." He pauses, hearing the distant purr of the engine through the bulkhead. "It sounds like progress now. Like change. Like hope. Share this story if you believe true leadership means having the courage to change." The brass insignia sits on his desk, transformed from a mark of rank into a testament to transformation. Tomorrow it will be displayed in the Naval Engineering Academy's museum, alongside a plaque honoring Brandon Clark's contributions to naval engineering practices, a reminder that wisdom comes in many forms, and true strength lies in the humility to recognize it. The engine's song echoes through the ship, no longer just a mechanical rhythm, but a symphony of progress. Each note a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from standing firm, but from learning to bend.